to the Northeast Clean Freight Corridors Workgroup. This is webinar number 6. Yes, we're at number 6. Very exciting. Today's focus will be on preparing applications for alternative fuel corridors. We have a wonderful lineup for you today, so we're really excited about today's presenters and our content. My name is Alicia Gildy, and I'm the Northeast Regional Director for CalSTART, a national nonprofit organization for clean transportation, and I'm also the chair of the Strategic Planning Committee for the Northeast Diesel Collaborative. And I am joined here with the Northeast Diesel Collaborative team and various wonderful stakeholders who've been a part of the planning process for our Clean Freight Corridor activities. So let's go ahead and take a look at today's agenda. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you plan to participate, and of course we would love for you to talk later and chime in, please make sure that you've enclosed your audio pin when you dial in, just so that we can unmute you and you can speak freely. Otherwise, we'll have to ask you to enter your question or your comment into the comment box when we get to the discussion portion of today's call. I also wanted to acknowledge that we do have 4 handouts that I've enclosed in today's webinar. A copy of today's presentation. We also have a 2-page highlight piece of the RFI requirements for the Federal Highway Administration's RFI for Clean Corridor Designation. So that's there for your review at your convenience. We also have our revised drop-in language for the alternative fuel corridor application to support our regional partners, and if it's something that can help your application, or it could even possibly be a letter of support. And then we also, for folks who want to just learn a little bit more about what we're doing here as a work group, we also have another 2-pager or 3-pager, if you will, basically describing what our mission is and what we're trying to do and how we're seeking partnerships to work together. All right, so what I would like to do today is first I want to just show you how we're progressing against our roadmap. We do have an exciting workshop coming up that I think all of you will be very interested in. Of course, we want to see all of you there come November 2nd through the 4th in Troy, New York. And then we'll get into today's topic, and we're going to spend a good amount of time talking about how we need to prepare our applications for alternative fuel corridor designation under the FAST Act, Section 1413. And we have some wonderful, wonderful speakers who are going to help us better understand that RFI, as well as understand what existing alternative fuel infrastructure and truck electric supply equipment that we have in the Northeast states. And then finally, what we want to do is we really want to talk about, okay, who's interested in submitting an application, and how can we help you? We have a wonderful group of different stakeholders, Clean City partners, various tech providers, MPOs, state DOTs. We have a number of really good partners. How can we work together? How can we support your application? So we'll get into that, and that will be a good part of our discussion today. All right, so here is our roadmap that shows how we've progressed against our timeline. And right now you can see we're at number 6, which is our part 2 of our alternative fuel corridor applications. Our last call, we talked about designating clean corridors. This was prior to the RFI coming out. We didn't know exactly what was going to be in the RFI, but we had a good idea based on some really good discussions, the 2 webinars that Federal Highways had hosted, as well as just kind of better understanding how can we start thinking about preparing a successful application, what corridors should we be looking at, who are the partners we want to engage and involve in the process. Well, now we're actually at the part of, okay, the RFI's out, it's time to get to work, it's time to move this forward. So you'll see here, this is July 28th, and then our next work group call, and again, we can discuss this as a work group if we want to continue our conversation. By August 25th, all applications should be submitted by then. The application deadline for the RFI, the applications for a corridor designation, is on August 22nd. So it might be an opportunity for us to talk about that on our webinar number 7. We were also thinking about talking about, okay, let's learn a little bit about the technologies. Let's learn a little bit more about infrastructure and equipment, and how do we advance clean transportation along our clean freight corridors. All right, so the next I just want to make sure before we started to dive in today's discussion is to make sure that you all have on your calendars a save the date for our Northeast Clean Freight Corridor workshop. So in this earlier, you see this roadmap. All of the discussion that we've had leading up to now is all going to be directing us to our workshop. So I think it will be a really important opportunity for us to evaluate what we've learned, the progress we've made, and then understanding how we're going to move forward as a region promoting clean freight corridors. So please make sure you have this on your calendar. We're now kicking off the planning process for this workshop, and we are going to be seeking feedback from you. We want to make sure that we're developing a program agenda that's going to meet your needs and your interests. So we will be soliciting your feedback as we start pulling the program together. But it's going to be a pretty exciting day-and-a-half program in Troy, New York at RPI, who is going to be our wonderful host. So today's discussion leaders. So first, and I'm so excited, and Diane, thanks so much for joining us. Diane Turchetta from the Federal Highway Administration is going to give us an overview of the RFI, just kind of give us some highlights on the requirements and what needs to be considered. And then we'll allow a little time for folks to ask questions to Diane, which is great to have her on board for today's call. Then we're going to talk about existing infrastructure in the Northeast. And we have two wonderful presenters that have joined us today. Aaron Russell-Story, who is the Regional Director for the Clean Cities Program for the Northeast. And then we have John Thornton with Clean Future. He's going to be talking about truck electric supply equipment in the Northeast. So John, we're excited to have you. And then finally, Abby, Susan, and myself will help kind of facilitate the conversation and seek your input, seek your ideas, and seek opportunities for us to partner and collaborate. All right, so our first speaker is going to be Diane. Diane, I'm going to turn it over to you, and when you're ready, just let me know, and I'll click the next slide.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm ready to start here, so you can go ahead and click. Okay. I know you all probably are familiar with the requirements of Section 1413, but I'll just run through them real quick as a reminder. FAST Act, Section 1413 required the Secretary to designate corridors to improve mobility of passenger and commercial vehicles that employ electric vehicle charging, hydrogen, propane, and natural gas fueling technologies across the U.S. And that was to be done within 1 year of enactment, which puts us at December 2016. However, we have a little bit of an accelerated schedule, and announcements will be made somewhere in the month of September. I'm not sure who, when, where, but that's the target month, probably mid-September we're looking at. So we were also required to identify near and long-term need for the infrastructure and really take a strategic look at locations along major national highways. So the solicitation process, the nominations, as you know, are coming from state and local officials. And I had an interesting question yesterday from, I forget where it was from, that was wondering if a mayor or a member of a state legislature could nominate. And I certainly don't see any reason why that couldn't happen. So as we go along, and as I told Alicia before, I'm sure we'll be getting questions we didn't even think of in terms of the nominations and what folks are planning on doing. So also we are to incorporate the existing infrastructure out there, take a look at demand and location of it. If you go to the next slide, Alicia. And we also, of course, had our two webinars to gain some stakeholder involvement, some ideas, and get the voice of stakeholders in terms of what the RFI should look like. And I hope everyone thought we weren't too much off the mark on that. The provision also requires us to do a report that identifies infrastructure and standardization needs for all of the fuels within the 1 year of enactment, which again is December 2016, and also take a look at the aspirational goals of achieving the strategic deployment of infrastructure and corridors by the end of 2020. And also to the redesignation of corridors, and a new report every 5 years is required by the provision. So we can go on to the next slide, and I have to say, while this slide is going up, I'm not even going to pretend I didn't copy this from Alicia, because I did. So you all have seen this, Alicia's good work here that I plagiarized for the FAST Act, but just to take a run through it, number one, we held our national webinars in May. The RFI was developed late May, early June. We incorporated, hopefully, most of, or if not all of, the stakeholder feedback we heard. Of course, the RFI was issued July 22nd, and that was a special gift to me because that was my birthday. So that was really cool to have it published on July 22nd, and we were looking for a 30-day nomination period, which would take us to August 22nd. Of course, as the nominations come in, we have no idea how many, but we'll go through a screening and evaluation process. We'll make recommendations to the Federal Highway Administrator, and also, of course, since the Secretary is the one doing the designations, we'll discuss everything with our counterparts in the Office of the Secretary. And we'll also be doing a follow-up Federal Register notice announcing the designations, and most likely laying out a process for the rolling designations that we talked about in the RFI, which I can talk about in a few minutes. So as I said before, designations are planned on being announced in fall, hopefully September 2016. Okay, we can go to the next slide, and just some of the goals that were thought of as we were preparing the RFI, and what Federal Highway was really looking to get out of this. You know, the main goal of the whole exercise is to create and expand this national network of alternative fuel infrastructure along highway corridors, and to ensure that the corridor designations are selected based on some, you know, really solid criteria that would encourage and promote the build-out of a national network. One other thing we added to the RFI is the development of national signage. You probably read in there, the sign will say alternative fuel corridor for CNG and propane, and zero emissions corridor for EVs and hydrogen. And of course, we encourage multi-state and regional cooperation and collaboration, and we will do this all you know, with our friends at Clean Cities and others at the Department of Energy, and all along listening to stakeholders and things we can do to make the process easier, and of course, always listening to input. So the next slide goes over the criteria, and the criteria really fell into 4 main categories. The first being the number of existing and planned or projected alternative fuels facilities along the corridor. And we're looking at things like the distance and accessibility. The next being the corridor scale and impact. You know, the connections to the national highway system, how the feeder routes and roads that are included in this provision that can be designated feed in to the highway system, and how it really connects communities in metropolitan areas. The third major criteria is associated emissions reductions. We're looking at criteria, air pollutants, and greenhouse gas emission reductions. I know sometimes that's difficult when you're looking at projections, but if there's any ideas of what kind of reductions we get due to the existing facilities and then the planned facilities are projected on the corridor would be very helpful. And of course, as with every nomination, the development of the team and degree of collaboration is really important. One thing we thought was important is, although the nominations do not have to be led by a state or local transportation agency, it's always probably a good idea for the state or local transportation agency that has the jurisdiction over the corridor or the road that's being designated, that they're you know, supportive and collaborated with, since they're, you know, they ultimately do have jurisdiction over it. There's also in the RFI, it contains some information to be included in the application or nomination, and some really optional information and considerations. Some such as is the corridor located in non-attainments or maintenance areas, and a few other things that aren't exactly criteria, but would be really good to have in the nomination process. So some details. The next slide. I didn't really know how to lay this out, but this is kind of as the RFI evolved, and folks from the Secretary's office and our Administrator's office and even the White House had input on some of the things that maybe originally that we thought we would carry out would be changed, or had some ideas of how we could do it differently. So we originally, if you remember the webinars, we were going to designate maybe 15 to 20 corridors, but others thought along the way, why limit it? We're trying to build out a national network, so as long as the criteria is met, we have no cap on the number of corridors, which could be a very scary proposition for those reviewing the nominations, but we'll see how that goes. And the other thing is that folks along the way thought, why wait 5 years for designations? They thought it would be a good idea, and I actually do too, that we would have rolling designations, that we wouldn't have to wait increments of 5 years if someone in a group want to designate a corridor and they've met the criteria. Rolling designations are fine, and what we'll do in the Federal Register, the next Federal Register notice that's coming out when the designations are announced, is lay out some kind of process and probably be the same criteria, but for the rolling designations and how that whole process is going to work. So I think I went over the signage. And all of this is really, we've worked very close with DOE, both the Clean Cities folks and other folks in the Vehicle Technologies office at DOE, to really, as someone put it once, they saw DOT as kind of through this designation process responsible for strategically putting the dots on the map, and then us working with DOE on some of the getting into the weeds and the technology and siting and design. And so it is really a partnership with DOT and DOE, and I'm really happy that happened, because it's been informal for years that we've been working with them, so this kind of gives it a more formal approach. And just the last slide is just our website and where you can find information for emails, and this is where we blasted out where the Federal Register notice came out, and so if you want to sign up there, you'll get updates on this RFI for the designations and other items too. And I think that's all I had. Oh, there was yes, another slide that of course gave you some important websites. I think I skipped a slide there, but anyway. Oh, okay, yeah, thanks, Alicia. That was the slide I was talking about. If you can go back to the one with the link, sorry. Just wanted to remind folks where they can find the Federal Register notice, and if you wanted to look at the actual provision, there's a link to the actual provision in there in the FAST Act, and my contact information. Anyone should feel free to contact me, call me, email me. I'd be happy to answer questions. I've been doing that quite a few times over the past days, and like I said, there's been some interesting questions coming up and things we didn't anticipate, so I expect more of that, and that's all good, because that means people are thinking about it. It's great.
Great, Diane, thank you so much. And well, do you mind taking a few questions now?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, wonderful. No, and it's really great to hear about the potential of rolling designated corridor applications. I think that's great, because waiting another 5 years, there's just so much work to be doing. We could be making progress. So really, really cool to hear that might be a potential change. So that's something to look forward to. That's great. Well, I would love to just open it up to our group. I have Abby and I are kind of controlling today's webinar, and what I would like to do is, first kind of open it up to the team. Any questions for Diane? She gave a really good overview and good presentation and highlighted some things for us to consider and keep in mind. Any questions? And what I would like to do is direct you to where you see your name. If you can just raise the little hand or click on the hand, or you can enter a question in the question box, and we'll make sure that we recognize you. Let me give it a minute and see if anyone has any questions. All right, Mike, hold on one second. I'm going to unmute you. Go ahead, Mike.
Mike Hornsby. So, can you hear me?
Yes, you're Mike.
The question that I'm getting from the brass is, what's in it for us? So if you could help me respond to that, that'd be helpful.
Well, I think what's in
us
it,
being a state.
You being a state. I mean, basically, it is the ability. And I don't know, Mike. Excuse me, what state you're from?
New Jersey.
New Jersey. I think it's an opportunity to, I know there's been a lot of state-led efforts, local efforts to build up a network, and I'm, talking about all the fuels, but mainly, I guess, CNG and EVs. And I think it really helps states in terms of calling attention to what they're trying to do. There also will be, when the provision came out, of course, I said many times there's no funding. However, since then, we've had, DOE's loan program step up to the plate, as you saw in the White House, hopefully you saw in the White House press release, yes. Made available some loan money for that, and also as states are looking at kind of activities to spend their Volkswagen settlement money on, I think this makes this, something that went from something nice to do, to be designated, to a reality, and actually being able now to look at putting infrastructure in the ground. And in general, I mean, what's in it for you? I think reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, air quality. Your state's looking at air quality concerns. I think from a kind of a marketing aspect, tourism, all those things that, kind of provide the state with the ability to say we're doing something, and we're moving the interstate into the 21st century. And I don't know if that's enough for New Jersey, but there seems to be a lot of interest and excitement about it.
I understand. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
All right, Diane, question for you, and kind of going along the lines of Mike's question. So will there be any, in terms of future funding opportunities, might there be an opportunity to say that corridors that are designated as alternative fuel corridors would be given higher priority for funding for a potential, funding pot through, whether it's DOT, whether it's DOE? Might that be something to consider to help when funding becomes available, give priority to those designated corridors?
Yeah, and I think that's, of course, that was in the FAST Act for the CMAQ program, that a designated corridor would receive priority for CMAQ funding. And I don't want to overpromise that because of the way the CMAQ program works, but it is highlighted and called out, if there is a designated corridor, you should really take a look at, using your CMAQ dollars for infrastructure on that corridor. And I can't speak for DOE in terms of the Clean Cities Program, but I would imagine that maybe down the road and in the next budget, maybe, and of course, the next reauthorization, you'll see, maybe more dollars flowing that way, but it's just hard to say right now.
Sure. No problem. Well, I have a question, or Martha, I've gone ahead and unmuted you, dear. Go ahead and speak up.
Well, I just wanted to say to Mike, you know, I'm with the Bridgeport Port Authority, and we did something similar with the Federal Marine Highway program, and we received our designation. We sought and received a designation as a crossing in that program, and not for any reason. Well, I shouldn't say that, but it didn't cost us anything to do it, and what it means is that we're already recognized by that agency for any future funding sources. It kind of gives us a little bit of a priority, if you will. So that's all I have to say about that, to your question.
And Martha, introduce yourself, where you're from.
I'm with the Bridgeport Port Authority in Bridgeport, Connecticut.
Thanks, Martha.
Hey, this is Barry Carr, and I'm not on the webinar. I'm just on the phone. But to Mike, to further things along for Mike, I volunteer as a Clean Cities coordinator in upstate New York, but I work full-time for Landy Renzo that manufactures natural gas and propane operating systems for vehicles. And I just think it's a great way to link together multi-states. You know, obviously we've been looking at I-95 that goes not only through the Northeast Clean Cities region that Aaron Russell Story is responsible for, but the Mid-Atlantic region going down into Jersey and Pennsylvania. And I just see it as a way for fleets to be able to expand their operation in areas for both natural gas and electric vehicles where they are not currently operating them.
Great. Thank you, Barry. Stephanie, I've unmuted you if you have a question for Diane.
Actually, this is Stephanie's alter ego, Rick Hanley from Connecticut DOT. Hi, Diane. How are you?
Hey, Rick. How you doing?
So, yeah, I seem to like chase you around to all of your webinars. So, but this one will look especially interesting. One of the things that has sort of shaken the foundations around here has been they need an emissions analysis, and so we're trying to determine to what level and specificity you're looking for this. Are you looking at it for each major link in each corridor, and are you looking at it? Would we have to provide it by different fuels as to what we would predict the different penetrations, say, into the marketplace of EVs might be at 1% penetration or 5%, 10%, and give you a projected emission reductions for each different type of pollutant. So I can stay offline and take your answer.
We're not looking for a scholarly kind of research project on it, that's for sure, in terms of full-blown analysis. We're just an idea of from your existing facilities, maybe if you have some air quality reduction goals or greenhouse gas emission reduction goals, what you're seeing from those facilities in terms of the amount of fuel displacement and how that translates into reductions from the use of gasoline or diesel, and then carrying that over into if you have 5 facilities within the span of the corridor or a certain part of a corridor and you're planning 15, what would that look like in terms of reduction? So we're certainly not looking for any full-blown analysis, just an idea of here's a CNG or here's an EV facility. Right now, especially you have your facilities at the rest areas, what kind of utilization are they getting, and how does that translate into reductions, and something high level. We're not looking for a heavy lift here.
Thank you.
Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay.
Great, thank you. All right, Susan, I believe you have a question. Go ahead.
Hi, Diane. How are you?
Hey, Susan. Good.
Thank you for the presentation. In the Federal Register notice, it says that the nomination must include support from the Transportation Agency or agencies with jurisdiction over the proposed corridor. On the other hand, there's that right-of-way issue, that basically says any service area, trying to find it now, any service area, what was it, post-1960 cannot actually sell the fuel. So to me, it kind of feels like a lot of the infrastructure by process of elimination right there is going to be actually, you know, off highway. How do we make it work with the state DOTs then? If it's like an economic development agency or something like that that sees this as, you know, something positive, and they want to see it happen on a, you know, industrial corridor, for instance, that is not necessarily a major, it's a feeder route, basically. Do you still have to go to the DOT and get that? Will it, will it be, ultimately it probably will wind up being sited on potentially private property too. So how does that work?
It could be, but you know, and for the most part, yes, you're right. The prohibition on commercialization does keep, it doesn't keep the infrastructure off, but it keeps any type of fee being charged for the fuel or the charging for electric vehicles, unless you're a grandfathered area, which of course Rick, like in Connecticut, is. I mean, what you're going to have in the nomination is, you know, either something along the corridor, something on a feeder route, or, you know, something that feeds into the national highway system. Some state, usually state or local transportation agency is going to, I mean, who fixes the potholes on that road? You know, it would just, and we're just saying it would be a really good idea to have that entity know that this road or this highway, this corridor is being designated. And like I said before, they don't have to be the nominating official, but just as a support in terms of the nomination and awareness for them that, you know, this road you have jurisdiction over is being nominated. So it's just
and so would
you
need, so would the applicant need to show some signed document from the DOT official?
I don't think you need a signed document. I think you explain in the criteria under the collaboration, the fourth criteria, that, you know, you have you know, you've collaborated with whoever has jurisdiction and they're supportive, and you know, leave it at that.
Yeah, yeah. I wonder how you would demonstrate that, I guess, in that situation. Okay, well, thank you.
We'll take your word for it. I guess we'll find out if we designate it and someone starts yelling at us, right?
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Susan. All right, I have, let's maybe take a couple questions and then we'll continue on. Jeff, I've unmuted you.
Yeah, hi, Dan. This is Jeff with Shore Power.
Hi, Jeff.
Hey. So as you know, we do truck stop electrification, and as well as you know, idling reduction for refrigeration, as well as electric vehicle charging. So my question relates more to a travel center scenario. I know truck stop electrification isn't necessarily a focus on this this group, but looking, I guess, further to the future, as we build the infrastructure, or say install truck stop electrification at a large travel center that might serve, you know, trucks and light duty, so we could have a scenario where a light duty electric vehicle charging is done on the same location. But looking further down on the heavy duty side, particularly the reefer or refrigeration type plugs are higher power, might be 480 volt, and could potentially charge an electric heavy duty truck or bus in the future. And, you know, there's, as you probably know, companies like BYD or TransPower and a startup called Nikolai that are actually building those vehicles as we speak and getting them on the street. So I guess the question is, although initially it might be for idle reduction, could we then look at more of a future use with that same infrastructure that does focus on propulsion or electric vehicles?
I mean, I would think so. I mean, as you know, we get in these 5-year increments of designations, I'm sure, you know, obviously technology is going to change, things are going to be changing, and circumstances are going to be changing, and we'll have to, you know, keep up with that. So I can imagine that, you know, in 5 years the criteria may look a little different and it may be more inclusive. I'm just not, you know, I'm not sure what it will look like in 5 years, but I could definitely see, you know, something like that happening, yes.
Okay.
Right.
Well, great, thanks.
Sure.
Diane, this is Abby, kind of along the same lines. When the RFI was first discussed, it had more of a balance between freight and passenger interests, I think. And of course, this is the Northeast Clean Freight Corridors group,
right.
Although certainly no enemy of passenger alt fuel use for sure. Can you just philosophize for a minute, to the extent you're able to, on what DOT wants to see in terms of the balance in serving freight interests versus passenger interests, and how they see that kind of evolving or dovetailing over time?
I don't think I've ever heard of any, you know, we want a certain percentage of passenger versus freight. I think it's kind of an all of the above, and that will heavily depend on the, you know, the nominations we get in. But, you know, I guess it just depends, once again, you know, with the last conversation on the technology and, you know, like truck stops having maybe at some point some EV chargers or something available for passenger cars. So, you know, I wish I had a good answer for that, but I really don't. I think it depends on what happens, but there's really, I think it's a level playing field in terms of passenger versus freight. And I know some of the multimodal stuff may have, you know, through the reiterations, different, the RFI may have got played down a little bit, but, you know, it's still very much a part of what we're talking about in alternative fuel corridors. And also the little bit in there about connections to intermodal facilities and things like that. So, you know, there's certainly no preference. That was never ever discussed in terms of passenger cars, but you know, I think everyone knows with growth rates of freight and the focus that DOT has now put on freight movement that, you know, it's very much a part of this.
Great, that makes sense. Thanks.
Okay.
Wonderful. Just a quick comment, and then we'll move ahead here. Mike Hornsby had mentioned that the California Transportation Electrification Assessment showed that truck stop electrification yielded the best bang for the buck in terms of CO2 emission reductions. So thanks for that, Mike. That's great. All right. Well, Diane, thank you so much. Wonderful presentation, and thanks for answering all of our questions. And certainly, like Diane suggested, folks feel free to reach out to Diane if you have additional questions. Her contact info is here, and as well, we've attached this presentation today to the webinar so that you can have all the contact info you need from the speakers today. So, good deal. Thank you so much, Diane.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
All right, well, now I'm going to hand it over to Erin Russell-Story. She is with the U.S. Department of Energy and represents the Clean Cities Program for the Northeast, and was kind to introduce the Clean City Partners for the region and the good work that they're doing and how this will help our work group members as they look at their applications and understanding what existing infrastructure is near them, and then certainly taking advantage of the valuable partnership opportunity that they can have with their Clean City partner. So Erin, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, and I will control your slides, so if there's an additional push you need me to make, let me know. Also, folks, just heads up, there's a little time delay with these slides, so you can tell me to click, and sometimes it takes a couple seconds before it appears. So bear with me. But Erin, go ahead and take it away. Erin, you might need to unmute yourself. Erin, you might still be on mute. Erin, you might need to enter in your audio pin. I see you up here. I just don't see you highlighted green. We'll give Erin 1 minute here. Okay. Thank you, Abbott. Okay, so just so you guys know, behind the scenes, we're trying to make sure that Erin gets a pin so that she can enter that in. All right, just stand by 1 more minute. I heard Erin earlier. All right, Erin, go ahead.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, yeah, I think I had not entered the correct audio pin, but then I still couldn't, then you still couldn't hear me. So anyway, whatever it was, thanks. Hi folks, I'm Erin Russell-Story. Thanks again for having me on. I'm really excited to collaborate with this group. As Alicia mentioned, I'm with the U.S. Department of Energy. I'm with the Clean Cities Program. And I work with the Clean Cities Coalitions in the Northeast region. We define the Northeast a little bit differently. It's New England and New York, and no offense to New Jersey, it's just an internal way that we have to divide up the country in workloads. For those of you who aren't familiar with the program, this is a program of the U.S. Department of Energy. We're in the Vehicle Technologies Office, which is part of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy. We've been around since 1993. And I'll ask to advance to the next slide. And our mission is to reduce petroleum and greenhouse gas emissions in the transportation sectors and to reduce our dependence on foreign oil. And we do try to make our transportation more sustainable. We work on the national and the local level, and we do this primarily through building partnerships and through our local stakeholder bases with our Clean Cities coordinators. So next slide, please. Just a brief overview of the types of fuels and technologies we do use and focus on. We actually are fuel neutral, so we encompass activities on all these fuels that are listed here, including idle reduction, advanced technology vehicles like plug-in electrics, plug-in hybrid electrics, and truck stop electrification, and some other new burgeoning smart mobility activities as well. Next slide. Okay, so I'm going to give you a brief snapshot of who the key people are in the Northeast to interact with regarding alternative fuels in your areas. So we have coalitions in every state, and in some cases we have multiples. I have all their contact information listed here. This is all as up to date as I have. I did include Chuck Feinberg from New Jersey, even though he is not in our DOE Northeast region. He's New Jersey is obviously part of the Northeast, the collaborative region, and we want to make sure that that everyone knows that he's an exceptional contact, I must say, in New Jersey. So all these folks, and if you'll advance to the next slide, because I have 3 slides of contact people, because we have 15 coalitions in the Northeast, and then if you throw in New Jersey, that's 16. So we have 6 coalitions in New York, and we have 4 coalitions in Connecticut. We did just scroll through these pretty quickly, but you can get all of their information. If you want to go ahead to the Connecticut slide, that's fine. One more. Perfect, thank you. All their information is available through that link, cleancities.energy.gov. The website is searchable, so you can actually type in the state or the town, and it will pull up their information for you. So I just want to stress that as these efforts go forward to especially build the information about existing AFV infrastructure, CNG propane, truck stop electrification, and EVSE, I can't stress enough how beneficial it will be to loop these folks in, because they're the ones who really know what infrastructure is available, what infrastructure may be coming online in the future, and they can really help determine the gaps and where infrastructure will be needed. If you want to advance one more slide, please. So the Clean Cities Program, we do kind of break our work down into 5 major activities, but I'm really going to focus on the first one, if you'll click one more time, which is our outreach and education efforts and our information that we provide to the general public. So one of those very important things that we provide to the public is a tool and a website, the Alternative Fuels Data Center. You can advance the slide, please. So the AFDC, in addition to having scads of information about specific fuels, their pros and cons, vehicle types, etc., we also provide a station locator, which I think will be pretty handy as folks develop your collaborations and applications. So I'm going to talk through briefly and in a little bit of a static way how to use this interactive tool. So if you'd advance one more, please. So under the Locate Stations button is the Alternative Fueling Station Locator. And you can see that map right there. That's unfiltered. That's every alternative fueling station in the United States. So that's a lot. And obviously, that would be a lot of information for folks to weed out. So the way that you would narrow that down is you can do it either by what I have circled there, it's find stations, or you can do a plan a route. So if you will click one more time, please, or advance one more time. So I think that the planning a route tool will be what's most valuable for this application preparation. See, what I did here for the screenshot was I just asked it to pull up all fueling infrastructure between Albany, New York, and Boston, Massachusetts, just as an example. And so you can see there's quite a bit there. And if I were to click on the fueling station, it actually would give you details, and I can talk over that in a moment. But will you click one more time, please? Okay, I guess I did. I did the. There we go. I did the animations on this slide. Okay. So you can also, instead of pulling up every type of fueling infrastructure along a planned route, you can also drill down and have it pull up just a specific type of fueling. So by using the all fuels box, if you hover on that, it'll bring up a drop-down box, and you can specify the type of fuels along that route that you're interested in. And once you pull that up, you'll see just the fueling type. If you were looking for only EVSE, it would show you only EVSE along that route. Also, then, if you would click on a particular station, which I didn't do a screenshot of that just to try to shorten my slides a little bit, you can get all of the fueling providers or the fueling stations, the exact location, the contact information, and some of the really important particulars like the address, the phone number, the method of payment that's accepted at each location. So those are really critical things as you're planning your route. May not be so critical for your application, but as projects go forward, you'll want to be able to have that information. And then what I have circled down at the bottom is, do I have to just have this in a map format, or can I export this data? So the answer is yes. You can download a spreadsheet of whatever information that you put into the search fields. And I think that that's also going to be pretty handy for an application process. So if you'll click to slide 11, please, the next slide. Thank you. So we also have I guess I have my things on the wrong slide. There we go. We also have a truck stop electrification locator. The way that I know how to get to it is going through the tools button that I have circled at the top, and it will pull up this screen that you see here, and in the bottom middle you'll see truck stop electrification stations or sites. And actually I might add that while you're on this page, if you do decide to do this offline after the webinar, is there are a lot of really interesting and very useful tools, planning tools and calculators available on AFDC that are meant to help communities plan for smarter transportation use, alternative fuel vehicle use, to reduce their petroleum footprint through transportation. So I really want to encourage all of you out there, if you haven't made yourself familiar with these tools, please take a moment and do so. And then if you would click to the next slide, please, which I think is my last slide. So once you get into the truck stop electrification locator tool, you can see on the map there's lots fewer dots there than there are all of the whole spectrum of biodiesel to EVSE. But if you click on one of those orange dots, it will pull up all the kind of biographical data that you need for that station. And then you can also go over to what I have circled on the right, which is a listing. You can ask it to pull up a listing of the electrification sites, the truck stop, the TSE electrification sites by state. So I think that will be pretty key as well. One last thing I'd like to mention is that the questions come up is what if you see sites that or what if you notice that you know of a station that's not on this tool, or what if you see a site that you know is closed. So there is an option. You can contact the site administrator. That's a contractor for DOE. You can contact them and let them know this information. But I'd also like to recommend that you work with your Clean Cities coordinator to add or change any information on the station locator that you see that's necessary to be made. And there's a reason for that, because the DOE, we really built our network of Clean Cities coalitions to be the local and regional experts in alternative fuels and alternative fueling station locations, identifications, and really trying to build the local market. So we really depend on those folks. But I just listed in those three slides across the Northeast. We really depend on them to know more or less everything that needs to be known about the alternative fuels market in their area. So by looping them into problems that you identify helps us make a stronger market and a stronger alt fuels industry. So also to the other thing I'd like to stress, and kind of on that same note, is circling back to what I said in the beginning, with that list of Clean Cities coordinators, as you go forward building your applications and you're looking for lists and identifications of available fueling infrastructure, and even identifying gaps and a plan for building or where new stations might be built in the future. I can't stress enough how important connecting with your Clean Cities coordinators will be, because they're the folks that really know all the inside skinny on the alternative fuels industry in the Northeast and to a great degree actually across the whole United States. So that's what I've got. Thanks for listening.
Wonderful, Erin, thank you so much. I think what we'll do, we have about 30 minutes left in our call, and I want to make sure that John has an opportunity to present. We're going to hold questions to after John's presentation. John, if I can kindly request, I know you have a lot of good information, maybe keep it to 10 to 12 minutes so that we have some good discussion time following your presentation and Q&A. So let me go ahead and turn it over to John.
Okay, John, thanks, Alicia. Yes, thank you. So I'm pleased to share information on electrified parking spaces, a segment that's also known as truck stop electrification, or TSE. Electrified parking spaces is a form of transportation electrification that can be overlooked. I'll be looking at today and sharing with you a quick gap analysis on TSE to spark ideas for inclusion in the clean freight corridors in the Northeast. Again, my name is John Thornton. I'm the principal of Clean Future Consulting. We help businesses and industry become more energy efficient. And the specialization that I'm working in is refrigerated transport, working with businesses with transport refrigerators to reduce operating costs through technology and best practices. And some of the people I'm working with are refrigerated fleets, electric power industry through the Electric Power Research Institute, and directly with utilities. And I also work with verified technology providers like Shore Power Technologies and Idle Air and other stakeholders. If you could go to the next slide. So a little bit of background on trucks and idling. There's over 1 million heavy-duty trucks that are running on diesel about 40% of the time while they're stationary or idling. The reason for that is to provide heating and cooling services for truckers at their home, away from home, in the sleeper cab. That's driven quite a bit by the hours of service regulations from the federal government that require a 10-hour-a-day rest period and 34 hours a day a week for basically a rest or reset. If you could advance, please. With truck stop electrification, there's also some opportunities to solve two issues. There's a critical shortage of truck parking space capacity, and that's an opportunity to kind of tie together two things there. So when I'm talking about electrified parking spaces, simply we're talking about using electricity to heat or cool the cab or temperature control of cargo for refrigeration instead of using diesel while stationary. I have here a longer definition from EPA SmartWay, which you can read at your leisure. If you go to the next slide, please, Alicia. So here's a quick look at, all truck stop electrification is not necessarily the same, or EPS. There are some different segments, long haul versus local and regional, or return to base operations. There's idle reduction in trucks, and idle reduction in trucks with refrigerated trailers, which is what you see on the left hand of the slide. There's also idle reduction in transport refrigeration units in trucks and trailers with some important distinctions. Today I'm talking mainly about truck stop electrification at travel centers and truck stops. But we need to not lose sight that there's a need for idle reduction technology and infrastructure at other locations, terminals, distribution centers, cold storage warehouses, food manufacturers, and those sorts of locations. If you go to the next slide, please, Alicia. So here's a quick snapshot and a gap analysis looking at how many truck stops there are in the Northeast. There's about 11,000 truck stop parking spaces. Now I want to make the note this is understated, and the criteria for my data set follows the criteria for a truck stop or travel center according to the National Association of Truck Stop Operators. There's actually a lot more places where trucks park and idle. Certainly highway rest areas are one, and other locations. But what I'm showing you here is just data for a very formal definition of travel centers and truck stops. There are 210 truck stops with 11,000 spaces again, and at TSE there are 15 truck stops with 635 spaces in the Northeast. You go to the next slide, please. Here's a quick look at where those truck stops are dispersed across the Northeast in Region 1 and Region 2. If you could advance the next slide, please, Alicia. And here's an overlay to look at non-attainment areas in the Regions 1 and 2 with truck stops. Probably no big surprise, about half of the truck stops are located in non-attainment or maintenance areas. You could go to the next slide, please. And here's a look at where our 15 truck stops across the Region 1 and Region 2 are. And if you could jump to the next slide, Alicia. And as you can see, those pretty much get swallowed up, or, you know, there's very few electrified truck stops in comparison to the number of truck stops that there are out there. So there's a big opportunity to increase the effectiveness of the truck stop electrification network if we can put in more electrified parking spaces at truck stops. We could jump to the next slide, please. So as was mentioned earlier, besides California, also the Department of Transportation recognizes that truck stop electrification and idle reduction is one of the most effective measures in the cost per ton reduced for NOx. And if you can go to the next slide, and also ranks up there very highly on our particulate matter. So again, for effective use of public funds, this is the area where we have some good returns on our investment. If you could jump to the next slide, please. So in summary, you know, the cleanest diesel engine is one that it does not run, or we use on electricity instead. Electric spaces and truck stop electrification is a heavy-duty zero-emission vehicle infrastructure that deserves equal treatment as light-duty EV charging. Unfortunately, you know, this is an area that actually has been omitted and excluded from the mitigation actions in the VW partial settlement, so we're a little bit behind on investment opportunities from there. But anyway, it's something that is EPS and TSC provides necessary high voltage and high power electric infrastructure that's needed for DC fast charging, whether for light duty or heavy duty vehicles. And in summary, it is a verified technology that's commercially available today, very much under, you know, big opportunities for improvement and in heavy duty freight vehicles. So with that, I'll open it up for questions, and my contact information is there if anyone wants to get more down in the details later.
Great, John, thank you so much. So we can trust that if folks wanted to get a little bit more familiarity with the TSC locations near them, that you would be a good person to reach out to and engage.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, wonderful. Well, let's do this, everyone. Let's spend a little time on questions that you might have for Aaron or for John. I think these are two, you know, both valuable partners, and of course, Aaron also introduced a number of other clean city coordinators in the Northeast that are, you know, truly just wonderful folks to work with, that are boots on the ground actually implementing the projects that are supporting the infrastructure, alternative fuel infrastructure, and are very knowledgeable about what projects are also being proposed and planned for. So this is great to have both of you on, and thank you for sharing information that you have on what's existing and how to access tools. So this is really great. So do we have any questions from folks? I'm going to go over here to my little attendee list here. Go ahead and raise your hand if you have questions for Aaron or for John.
Alicia, this is Abby. I had just a quick comment pursuant to what John said there at the end about the VW partial settlement. There are two ways that states can expend their funds, one of which is directly with a trustee, and those projects that they then undertake are constrained by the list that was published. But if they choose to take the DERA route for expending their funds, Truck stop electrification, electric parking spaces, e-true, those are technologies that are eligible under DERA, so they could then spend their funds that way.
Yes, absolutely. Although, one of the things with that, though, with DERA, it's subject to 25% funding versus if you look at, EV charging stations are eligible for anywhere between 60% to 80% or more. So, it's not equivalent on that basis, though, too.
We'll have to look into this later, but I think the state can then overmatch to sort of cushion that cost share requirement. Anyway, I just wanted to give folks hope that there are various sources of funds that this corridor designation effort could attract, kind of like a sponge, and one of them, I think, is the VW settlement money, not only for passenger purposes, but for freight purposes, and TSC is one of those.
Great. I also want to, I know we have a number of our Clean City partners on the line as well, and want to give them an opportunity to quickly introduce themselves. A number of them I've invited as panelists so that they can actively engage in today's conversation. I don't know if Lee or Barry, and I know that Steve Russell is also on, if you guys wanted to just quickly introduce yourselves, and we'll get into the partnership discussion and certainly encouraging folks to work with you, but maybe you want to spend a minute just introducing yourselves.
Barry, go ahead.
Barry, you're on mute probably.
How
about you, Lee? Go ahead. You can go ahead first.
Okay. I'm Lee Granis, Greater Haven Clean Cities. In fact, right now we're spending a lot of time verifying all of our alternative fuel infrastructure that's in our area of responsibility, and in other words, getting to the fine-tuning it, and for what Aaron showed you, to make sure that everything is accurate and everything works, and also taking pictures of the sites to upgrade them so people have a better idea by going to that link, and they can actually see what the site looks like. The physical construction of the site is one of the things we're looking at to make sure that all types of vehicles that the infrastructure is meant for can actually get off the road and into those sites. So we're working on that right now as we speak.
Great. That's great, Lee. Thank you. And I just want to acknowledge my other Clean City partners. Abby is on. We also have Jennifer Saponis from the Capital District Clean Cities in Albany. And I know Barry's on, Lee, Steve Russell. Another really good partner for everyone is Ron Golmy. He's been very familiar and worked for National Grid for a number of years and worked on EVSE and alt fuel infrastructure and is very familiar with New York. So he's another good partner to tap into. But yeah, so anyway, I guess we could, any other questions for Aaron or for John regarding existing infrastructure or any additional information that you might need as you're looking at your applications? These are definitely two really good contacts. Any other questions?
Alicia?
Yes, go ahead, Susan.
It's Susan. Hi. I raised my hand, but I wasn't sure.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I needed to be called out or not. I think this is for John. I'm interested also in your note about not having enough places to park trucks and to locate some of the stuff on the clean corridors. What sort of conversations are you having with any of those trade associations or the I-95 Corridor Coalition or anybody along those lines as to where, because it has to happen because of the the rules, right? The regulations for rest.
Right.
Where are these going to happen? Do you have any idea of the locations now? Because potentially that's where the build-out might be. So, or do they have any, future plans for additional sites that you might know of, and in your conversations with anybody along those lines? Is there anything you could share about that?
Well, yeah. So actually, Alicia, if you're able to unmute Jeff Kim, he's on the line. He's probably a little bit more closely tied in with that than I am. And it's not a secret that there's not enough truck parking spaces, and there are several different initiatives to look at developing that and resolving that problem. But honestly, I've not been as much involved, and Jeff would probably be someone that could speak a little bit more on that because he's been more directly involved in that side of things.
Yeah, hey, this is Jeff. Thanks. So my involvement, is more, well, actually there was a meeting in Washington, D.C. FHWA was there, I believe. Diane Truchetta was there. So she may be a good resource. But I know it's the general parking problem is an issue everywhere, of course, along major corridors as well. And many different groups and people and from federal to state level and down are working on truck parking. So I guess I'll defer to Diane if she's still there, but or still on the call. But I did have another comment on the VW funding. Unless there's other questions, I don't want to take up time if it's off subject a little bit.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Sorry. So, to kind of continue the conversation that John started on the CMAQ funds, at least in recent past, the 25% level is correct, and I know there's the overmatch ability. However, to sort of remove all barriers, it would be best for those stakeholders interested on this call. It would be best to get on the actual approved mitigation list, and right now that's open for comment. And I can send the link around, or someone else can send the link, but there's an email address that you can send comments to the Assistant Attorney General to ask to have whatever technology, including truck stop electrification or electrified parking, included on that list. And that, just from a administrative standpoint, would make it easier. From a business standpoint, the 25% level isn't quite enough for it to be, I guess, feasible. And so we're working with Idle Air. Between us and Shore Power are pretty much the only two major truck stop electrification providers at this point. But we put together comments and sent them in, and I would open it up to the group to provide comments as well, and hopefully sort of a unified approach and comments will make a difference.
Very good suggestion. Great, thank you, Jeff. I do want to highlight a couple questions that have come into the question box here. Edward Roderick had a question, or a compliment and then a question. AFPC and truck stop locator website look terrific. Is it mobile friendly, or are there plans to turn the data over to something like Google Maps so smartphones will be able to access the site locations? Maybe to Erin, this question?
That's an excellent question. I didn't mention that, but yes, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Sorry. Wanted to make sure I wasn't having the same problem as before. Yes, we do have a mobile app. It's the Alt Fuel Station Locator for smartphones. You should be able to get it from the iTunes store. Or buy it on your applications on your smartphone. I actually have to plead ignorance about the truck stop electrification locator. I actually do not know if that is available on a mobile app, but I can certainly get that information and get back to the group. And, you know, to be honest, one of the Clean Cities coordinators might know that information about the TSE locator.
This is Lee. The app is available on Apple. I'm not sure if it's available on Android yet or not, but for sure it's an Apple app. And Google actually would. Huh?
The TSE, sorry, Lee. The TSE locator is an Apple app.
No, the fuel station infrastructure is an Apple app.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's an Android app. And the other question about Google Maps, Google actually was copying from us until they had an agreement with the Department of Energy out at NREL over that. So actually we cooperate with Google on the mappage at this point.
Or they cooperate with us, maybe.
Which one would you do? I'm not sure about the TSE map. I'm not positive. I think it is, but I'm not positive.
Well, I'm going to send a quick email question while we're still on this webinar and get back to you if I get an answer in time. How's that?
That's great. Thank you, Erin. All right, and thank you, Lee. I have a question from Mary Grace Parker, and I think she may have had to leave the call, but that's okay. I'm recording this webinar, and we'll make sure she gets her answer. And I think, Diane, this is for you. I'm going to go ahead and read her question. She says, will I be able to step back and ask a question to Diane, building on Martha Klima's reference to when MARAD did corridor designations for America's Marine Highway? There was a process to designate a broad corridor and then for connectors and crossings to be added more to the local level. How can a multi-state coalition best support agencies in the application process, since this process seems to indicate it would be a state-by-state, local agency by agency? Oh, and Mary Grace is here. Hi, Mary Grace. Thank you. Diane, your thoughts?
Hey, can you hear me? This is Diane.
Yes, and I actually, Mary Grace, I unmuted you in case you wanted to chat back and forth. Go ahead, Diane.
Yeah, no, I just wanted Mary Grace to maybe elaborate a little bit on the question.
Okay, so if I could do this, and Martha Klimas kind of referred to it when she was talking. When we did the designations in the American Marine Highway System, and basically they went out for broad designations, thinking about, you know, ultimately there might be some money available for marine highway investments, but to sort of establish what those corridors are. So when I looked at this application process, you know, Condot's on the phone, Rich Hanley's here. Obviously, agencies can put in a submission and put together their data, but if you were to look up and down this corridor, and I'm going to go look at some of the Clean City stuff because it's pretty you probably could say that generally this particular corridor has the volumes, it's almost all a corridor that needs to meet some sustainability standards. It doesn't appear that there's a process to just say it's a broad corridor and there's issues to work on throughout this corridor, that particularly because of volumes of traffic that move across would really suggest that you really want to have, you know, consistent signage and consistent information. I didn't really get that context, where in the merit process you would look at sort of origin and destination of freight, of passenger movements, and say along this corridor there's enough mobility and viability to really want to look at having capabilities along the corridor. This seems, and just maybe it's the way I read it, seems to take it down to each state would make an application. So is the best thing for a coalition to simply support our members by, you know, reiterating that support and talking about the fact that in the response that as you all do these designations, you should look at your level at trying to make sure you provide corridor designations that actually link from a multi-state perspective? I'm just struggling a little bit, and I'll probably be reaching out to Rich and Stephanie and folks in our states, but I'm struggling with understanding what's our best role in this to help our members.
Well, I think it's I mean, by no means does it mean that you can't do some kind of, larger multi-jurisdictional, multi-state application and look from a broad corridor perspective? I think that kind of came up on the webinars, whether we were looking, just as, like, for example, I-95 as a broad linear corridor is certainly acceptable. It doesn't have to be a state-by-state looking at, feeder roads or, routes that feed into the national highway system. I mean, I think you can look at it both ways. What happened in the end with this is that the intention was to be more inclusive than exclusive and just broad. So I think what you're saying is definitely something that was thought about and is totally viable for a nomination.
And I think my comment back just for us or any corridor, other group that was looking at this is in the time frame to sort of get these responses in. And I know what the time frame was, and when preparing the marine highway application, we had a lot more time and a lot more resources to put into some really detailed information. The question is, what's that level? So I think it's something we can talk about internally in our corridor, but I don't get the impression that from a corridor perspective, we're going to have to break it down to every little nodule of, maybe using some broader figures might be applicable. And it could be that states will do their own, and the coalition could, on top of that, encourage a broad corridor designation. But I think it's a level of detail I was struggling with, because if I look at the time between now and when we want to get these applications in, it would be very hard to go down and do that same level of data availability that Connecticut, for example, may have, or New Jersey, across every state in our corridor, or a large majority of them.
No, that I think what you're saying is exactly correct. For some areas, they may be looking at more like around, a major port or something, more of the feeder routes. So, for them, that may be something they want to do, but by no means is that a requirement that, you would have to look at every nodule coming off of a highway system, that's for sure.
Okay, great. That's very helpful. And hopefully there's some other coalition folks that are on here from other entities, so thank you.
Great. Thank you, Diane. Thank you, Mary Grace. And so folks know, Mary Grace is with the I-95 Corridor Coalition, so really key and wonderful partner. So I know we have about 5 minutes left to our work group session today, and we've covered a lot, and great presentation, great information. We also wanted to kind of gauge from our work group members who's submitting an application, who's interested in submitting an application, and how can we help you. There's been some good discussion amongst some of our work group members looking at a regional application. I know there's some states that might be looking at submitting their own unique application, but nonetheless, we certainly want to support our regional collaboration, but we want to make sure that you're successful in getting your applications in, and then making sure that you have the partners available to you to provide you with the information that you're looking for. So what I've done is I've actually set up a survey, real quick, hopefully it doesn't take you too much time, but I've posed about 4 questions for you to respond to after we've closed our webinar today. And I kindly ask for your feedback so we can kind of get a sense of who's working on an application, who might be supporting an application, and then who's looking for some help, who's looking for some partnership, because we're certainly here to help you. So maybe we have about 4 minutes left. Abby and Susan, do you think maybe what we could do now is let's kind of throw the question out there. Who's working on an application, and is there interest in partnership, and how can we help facilitate that?
I don't know if ConDOT is still on the call, but that might be a good place to start.
Wonderful, and I also see Alan Ward also raised his hand too. Alan, how about you go ahead and let me see where CDOT is. Alan, take it away.
Hi there. New York State will be probably submitting an application. We're really, at this point, looking at something that's probably going to be fairly inclusive of, most, if not all, of our interstates and other major parts of the NHS.
Great, Alan, and you've got partners in us, and certainly, Alan, I know you know Jennifer and Barry and Christina and Rita. There's a number of good Clean City partners within the state that are there to help you. So that's great news, and we'll certainly be reaching out to you as if we're looking at our regional approach, how we can help one another. So that's great to learn, Alan. And Alan, thank you for being a part of our planning team. So we're lucky to have you.
Okay, well, thank you.
Before we turn from Alan, I was just wondering if he might want to ask the group, is there anything you need from other folks on this call in terms of being able to construct a network that goes beyond your boundaries?
At this point, I guess it's a little bit premature because we're still trying to pull our own network together. I have a feeling though that with the inclusion of most of our interstates, that's probably going to match up with a lot of the most likely designations that states adjacent to us would be considering. So I think that's a start. I think once we have a better idea of where we're going, internally, I think we'll certainly reach out to see if we're consistent with other states.
Great,
and
Alan.
Looks like 90 and 95, and maybe even 89. I'm just looking east. So anyway, just wanted to plant the bug.
Sure.
And Mike Hornsby, I've also unmuted you, but you also had said that New Jersey is considering an application, and you're looking for partners. I know Chuck Feinberg he regrets not being able to participate, but he's traveling at the moment, but certainly he would be a wonderful ally. So that's a really good contact that will get you to you, Mike. But any other thoughts from the group who would be interested in supporting New Jersey with their application?
Thank you for that. Yes, Chuck and I, we certainly know each other well. So I just heard Alan speak. So Alan, you have your email. I'll reach out to you as well. And mostly, I guess right off the bat, 95 corridor states are on the line?
Yeah, no, we'd really appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other 95 corridor states? Connecticut, yeah.
We have a master list of all our stakeholders that have been involved in one or more webinars, and so definitely Alicia and I can get back to you to supply individual contacts.
Thank you.
Great. I just have a comment here from Joseph Macari. Joseph, bear with me as I read your good comment here. The White House loan guarantee does mention efforts to identify effective EVs and EVSE corridors. It did not mention TSE, but I think that both technologies have similar problems with effective corridors, although it may be easier with TSE when there is a known number of trucks traveling on, let me scroll down, traveling down the highway. However, both applications need to look toward the future. An effective EVSE network will help EVs be successful. This also holds true for TSE. And if we are looking to the future, it is apparent that electrification of the transportation industry will continue. And who would have the thought that a short while ago there would be 3 companies claiming that they will be coming to market with electrified, maybe TSC, or electrified trucks. That's right. Thanks, Joseph. A really good comment there. Well, folks, we can spend a couple more minutes, but I want to be sensitive to your day, and I'm sure you've already had quite a long day, and this has been a great discussion. Any other thoughts on folks who are interested in submitting applications, or how can we help you, and how can we connect you? Oh, here, I have it. I see a hand. Okay. Hal, let me go ahead and unmute you here. Hal Morris,
good afternoon. Yeah, Hal Morrison with the MPO in Buffalo, Niagara, and just I haven't been part of your coalition before, and I got a link to you recently. So we have started and are very interested in doing this, and so Alan, I'll get in touch with you. I'd reached out to NISDOT last week for some initial discussions, and our Clean City coordinator over here also have started discussions too. We're right on the Canadian border with MTO, Ministry of Transport, because they do have a policy, and I want to see if we're currently doing a major ICM project here on the U.S. and Canadian sides combined. So I'm looking at if is there some way we can leverage Canadian cross-border, particularly the large volume of commercial traffic, into a clean corridor.
Yes, Hal. Yeah, I am aware of your request into Lynn, and we will definitely be contacting you to get things going.
Yeah, we may have an abundance of information you can use here too.
Great.
Thank you.
Sure.
Someone else have a question or a comment? Jerry, am I allowed to pick on you?
No.
Well, I was just wondering what your thoughts were, and I know that you are, you have a membership to engage. What's your thoughts on this?
Oh. Well, actually, while we were doing the proceedings, I was sending out an email to you and Susan to talk further about that, because we could encourage our membership to consider this and send out information about ways to support them. But given the way that the federal notice came out, it doesn't seem like there's a requirement for MPO actions. And given the short time frame, we should really take that into account. So trying to support and encourage, but not necessarily, maybe provide letters of plan consistency, those types of things, but not necessarily having to take this through an MPO process. Those are my thoughts, Alicia.
Those are good thoughts, Jerry. Thank you. No, totally understand. And you just let Susan and I know how we can help you.
Yeah, I'll be looking for that.
Okay, you got it. All right, folks. Well, it's about 5 minutes after. Any final thoughts before we close today? And again, I sense that you will be receiving a survey, and if you can just respond to that, that would be wonderful. And we're going to be having our next work group call in August, on August 25th. Right now, we're going to be talking about kind of the technologies and the alternative fuels and just learning more about what is out there and what we need to be considering for our corridors. But we can also prioritize on a topic that's more of importance, especially since everyone's going to be working hard on their applications and then submitting them, and a few days later we have our webinar, so it might be good to regroup on that process. Any final thoughts before we close today? Abby, Susan, Diane, Aaron, or John?
No, this is Diane. I wish everyone the best on their applications. We will be looking forward to seeing them. I'm sure there will be some creative and innovative things you all propose, and it's at a very exciting time, and it's been it's been really great working on this initiative in the FAST Act, and I just look forward to the designations and getting things underway.
Great, thanks, Diane. It's been wonderful working with you.
Yeah, you've worked really hard on this. So I just posted something in the chat box, just offering help after the call if folks want, you know, to get assistance in connecting with potential collaborators who might support your nomination or enhance your nomination. Feel free to email me. I put my email address up there, and you have Alicia's from the invitation to this call.
Great, thank you, Abby. That's perfect. And again, remember, we do have handouts that are attached to our webinar today, and we'll certainly follow up. We have this webinar recorded, so we'll make sure that it's available online. You can share it with other folks and make sure that all the resources that we've provided to you today are available online as well. But definitely take us up on partnership opportunities and how we can help you. We're really excited to hear about the folks that are considering applications. We're going to look at how we can support our Clean City partners in the Northeast. This is exciting, and we're looking forward to working with all of you. Again, just keep note and make sure you have your date saved from November 2nd through the 4th, and we'll be talking to you on August 25th. Thanks so much for your time, and thank you to the wonderful presenters for all your hard work on your presentations, and we look forward to talking to all of you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alicia.
Thank you.